2015. Would you please all rise for the flag salute? Excuse me. And good morning, Mr. Villalobos. Would you please read the TV coverage announcement and do roll call?
Good morning, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20, at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orcutt areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on CSB TV's website and can be downloaded in a couple of days. For the roll call, Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney. Here. Commissioner Blau.
Here.
And Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, Ms. Black. If you'd give us our agenda status report and projection report, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. This morning we have a very short agenda. We have one item, and it looks as though the parties have reached resolution, so don't expect that to take us very much time. We will be meeting next week as well, November 4th in Santa Barbara, and we have 3 items on your agenda. The Isla Vista Master Plan will be coming back to your commission. We have a lot line adjustment out in the Cuyama Valley, and then our first hearing to discuss, certainly not review ordinance language for short-term rentals. So this is the hearing where we're going to be asking the commission for some direction so that we can go off and draft ordinances that we think implements that direction. As your commission is probably remembers, when we added this to the work program, everybody wanted us to work on it, but it wasn't clear what direction the county wants to take. So that's what we'll be looking for on November 4th. We are agendized not to take up short-term rentals until the afternoon, so we've said it won't be heard before 1 o'clock. We anticipate it probably will be around 1 o'clock, but didn't want people to come early and waste their time. Then our next hearing will be on November 19th. As your commission probably recalls, November 11th is a holiday, which would have been our normal North County hearing, and so we needed to find a time to have a couple of items heard by the commission. So we're going to be meeting on November 19th in Santa Maria, and our hearing will start at 1 o'clock, and we have 2 projects on that date now. Originally we had 3. The Windset Farms project has been pulled from that agenda. It's not clear whether they're going to move forward with their appeal or not, but they do not want to move forward on November 19th. December 2nd, you've probably noticed there have been no hearing items, 3 hearing items, 1 hearing item. It's bounced back and forth. And I think we have finally settled on not having a hearing on November 2nd. Your commission may or may not want to cancel that today, depending on whether you think you might need to continue items to that day. But Commissioner Hartman is planning to be absent on December 2nd, so it does limit the number of items or the items that can be heard on that day. December 9th will be our next hearing, and that is in Santa Barbara. Even though it's typically a Santa Maria hearing date, we are going to have that meeting in Santa Barbara. We've scheduled your Planning Commission lunch that day, and as you can see, we moved the 1 item that was remaining on December 2nd to the December 9th hearing. I hate to do this to you, but we already have items projected into January, and it doesn't seem like we should be talking about January yet, but we are. Your first hearing is on January 6th, and we have the Tahigas Resource Recovery Government Code Conformity Project on that day. I question whether an hour will truly be enough time for that, so we may want to increase that amount of time, because I think that's tended to be a fairly controversial project. And I think that's all we have projected into January so far.
Okay.
Any questions?
Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, with regard to January, we have sometimes deferred our first January meeting due to the fact that staff is often on vacation around the Christmas holidays. So in this instance, you're comfortable setting a hearing on the 6th, and we're ready to go.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Cooney, yes, I think we can manage it. If there's concerns of the commission that you don't want to meet on January 6th, I'm certainly open to that. It seems like we kind of need to get going.
I'm fine with that, thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Commissioner Blau?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next, we'll move on to public comment, and this is the time for the public to testify on any item not on today's agenda. And let's see what speaker slips we may. We have one from Mr. Field.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Must be two, let me ask.
I'm here this week because it's the first meeting you have had since the Santa Rosa Road Winery thing. If it had been the next week, I would have been there the next week. You may or may not know that decision of yours was appealed. My name's the only one on the appeal, but it's on the behalf of a number of others and in the interests of a large number of others. So I wanted to let you know that and then tell you why and why it was not appealed. But there's been so much progress, I also now get to give you an update on where it's going. So first of all, let me say that the appeal itself, the first sentence in the appeal and the only thing in bold type says, first, the reasons for this appeal are not any criticism of the Planning Commission or any individual commissioner. Given what information was presented and was not presented to the Commission, they did better than might be expected. Our fundamental things we're after in the appeal are to reduce the visitation. The appeal was filed in half the time that was allowed for the filing. We pushed the facilitation as hard as we could. The process, I'm here less than 4 weeks after you did this, I think. We've already held the first facilitation meeting. We are very clearly on record. We are hoping to resolve it like we did with the Vincent case and bring a mutually agreeable deal to the board. One of the things that we learned there, and I wish I could quote, but I have to paraphrase Commissioner Cooney. The Planning Commission structure design process is not really very good at working out controversial, multifaceted, you pull one string, two get shorter. I'm sorry, your 3 minutes are up. You don't get a time to listen to someone and say, that's a good point. You don't get to say, yeah, but you can't talk about these complex issues. It's nobody in this room's fault. This is the system we were given. The appeal process is very different. Hopefully reasonable people are sitting across the table and trying to find a solution. And I think maybe the Rigoli example is this, is you sent people away and they came back with a solution. So the appeal is our avenue. And we're conducting it, of course, under confidence, so all I can tell you, I was hopeful going in, and after 4 hours, I remain hopeful. I do want to say, oh gosh, 35 seconds. On the information you had and did not have, let me stick at the highest policy level. For 8 years, people primarily in the San Ynez Valley have been trying to get the county to look at the facts that drinking alcohol impairs your ability to operate a car. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows how little alcohol impairs by how much. For 8 years, we've been trying to get the county to acknowledge that some county roads are particularly substandard and have way above average accident rates. You were not given those facts. Now, we get representative government. We get these are discretionary decisions. We get that it's your discretion, not ours. We accept that. And we accept that, as Mark Knopfler said, sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug. What we don't accept is that you are not being given the facts upon which to make fact-based policy decisions. And the county can expect on those two issues that in the future, every neg deck, every EIR, every application will be appealed over your failure to be given those facts until you are given those facts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, would you like to come up to the podium now, too, please? Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, my name is Ray Smith. I'm an elected member of the Board of Directors for both the Mission Canyon Association and the Santa Barbara Fire Safe Council. At your hearing that considered the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan, I spoke for both organizations against the proposal to designate Chaparral as an environmentally sensitive habitat. As we all know, that issue has now been decided by the Board of Supervisors. I commend this commission for all the work that you do for our county, and I appreciate the fact that you recognized during that Goleta Valley plan that there were details that needed further consideration. And as I recall, you recommended that County Fire and the Environmental Defense Center meet to resolve those details. Again, I commend you for that recommendation, since their meeting did in fact result in improved recommendations for the community plan. That said, I was appalled that stakeholders most likely to be impacted by an ESH overlay on Chaparral, namely homeowners and homeowners associations, were not included in your recommendation for backroom discussions. I think you all know that there are areas in the county that are called extreme high fire hazard severity zones, and that people within those zones pay an SRA fee. That, in fact, there are 13,875 fee payers according to CAL FIRE records, and they are owners of structures on properties located within the state responsible area. And again, primarily those are people who are in the proximity of Chaparral. And that fee provides for, and I quote, a stable source of funding for vital fire prevention activities such as fuel reduction activities that lessen the risk of wildfire, defensible space inspection, fire prevention engineering, and on and on. I think the point here is that there are a group of stakeholders that were not included in the backroom discussions. And should this issue come again before the city government in any form, I would hope that you would recognize that there are stakeholders within the extreme high fire zone that for whom the discussion is extremely important, and that overlaying Chaparral with an environmentally sensitive habitat layer of bureaucracy greatly impedes the whole purpose of what the SRA fees are for. And so a full and open discussion by all parties is deserving in that thing. Thank you very much.
Mr. Smith, thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
All right, so we move on to Planning Commissioner's informational reports. Commissioner Blau?
None here, thank
Okay.
you.
Seeing none here, then we move on to our minutes of September 30th. So I look forward to a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Right, any comments, changes, corrections? Seeing Commissioner Cooney?
I'll just comment that these were particularly lengthy minutes, and I read them closely, expecting to find some lack of conformity with what happened, and there was nothing except perhaps the time of adjournment might have been 1 minute shorter than actual, but I think we can let that go.
Good. Thank you. Well, and thank you, staff, for those great minutes. All right. So all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, you need a roll call, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Been rusty here. It's been a month since we've been here.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. We move on to our Director's Report and Board of Supervisors hearing summary.
Good morning, Commissioners. We will endeavor to insert a purposeful error in the next minutes so to satisfy the needs of Commissioner Cooney. We'll try to make it humorous and see if he notices. Since your last hearing, there have been a number of things that I'd like to briefly report on. On the 6th of October, we made a report to the Board of Supervisors on our Coastal Resiliency Project, which is our first foray into the world of climate adaptation planning, specifically focused on sea level rise. It's grant funded. We're doing the modeling, and all the local jurisdictions on the coast are taking advantage of the modeling that we're paying for. So it's a nice to sort of be the lead on. We kicked off the CREF cycle, so there has been and will be another workshop for that. Kathy Pfeiffer in the Energy and Minerals Division is running that, so we're looking forward to some good projects. On the 13th of October, there was an ag preserve consistency rezone that had to go to the board. We put it on the A agenda. Florence had that, and so that one went well. Also, there was a very interesting item on hoop structures. And the item on hoop structures was District 4 proposed to the board that the exemption for hoop structures from a building permit, if they are less than 12 feet tall, be removed, and that there be no height limit whatsoever, and also shade structures. And then he wanted us, the P&D, to insert a zoning code exemption for hoop structures and shade structures in the current general package that Noel is working on. That didn't work so well, but it did achieve one positive outcome, which is that we now have been given the task of going back in January to make some preliminary recommendations. Okay, these are the kinds of things that you might want to consider doing, and here's a process for it. The process is probably going to be putting it in our work program and bringing it back to the budget workshops in April. So we'll be working with District 4 on that and also stakeholders.
Commissioner Hartman.
I just, while you're on that topic, I wanted to ask a question, and that is, when we looked at the Gaviota Coast Plan, we tried to develop, and I think the board asked for it to be developed, some regulatory relief if there were environmentally positive behaviors or on-the-ground results. Is that part of what you'll be looking at in terms of the hoop structures? I mean, that maybe you could go higher if you use less water, less pesticides. Is there anything like that, or could you describe in more detail what you'll be doing?
Commissioner Hartman, through the chair, currently we're not proposing anything like that. I think that we'll simply be suggesting what might be a reasonable height limitation, given the fact that the state building code is really preeminent, and we're only supposed to be more restrictive, not less restrictive. And then if you want to exempt these things from a zoning permit, then this is what the process looks like. But that's it right now. That's our plan right now.
And let me just ask you, if I may, Dr. Russell, when you're going to put it in your work program, and there will be a much more thorough look at this, but it seems to me that with changing agricultural practices, that's got to be incorporated into kind of your thinking that goes into this, other than just sort of a pure, permit process.
Well, Madam Chair, we will absolutely be taking that into consideration. The fact of the matter is that and Commissioner Farini knows this very well, in order for agriculture to be successful, it has to be nimble. Right. And basically what we've got the practice has gotten out in front of the code.
Right.
And so we will be carefully considering what needs to be done and what flexibility should be allowed so that agriculture can continue to be nimble because it changes very quickly in order to be successful, and we recognize that fully.
Okay. Good to hear from you about that. Thank you.
Also on the 13th was the El Grosso GPA initiation request that you heard, the Skyview Motel in Los Alamos, and it was not initiated. They declined to initiate that GPA.
What was the vote on that?
3-2.
Okay.
Also, there was the holiday closure was approved, and so the week between Christmas and New Year's, we will be closed. People will be on call in the event of an emergency, but the department will be closed. And then on the 20th, that was on the 20th, also Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan, and that was approved. That was a 3-2 vote also, and the two issues that came up were the issue that Mr. Smith spoke of as to how to treat the chaparral, and in the end, what was decided by the board is that if in fact chaparral contains rare, threatened, or endangered species, then it should be considered environmentally sensitive habitat, but not all chaparral should be considered environmentally sensitive habitat. And then there was some discussion of the fact that we're doing a rezone to mixed use on Hollister, and certain property owners were not happy about that. And I think that really was the reason that it was a 3-2 vote. A couple just notes on other things. The Tom Fayram and I will be going to the board on November 17th with our first board letter on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I've been doing a lot of work on that, making some public presentations at conferences. It's, I think, the most significant piece of legislation for land use that I've seen since I've been a planner. We'll be going to basically say, here it is, this is what it looks like, and these are the dates and the issues you'll be facing, and also to specifically ask the board's permission to apply for a groundwater basin boundary change for the Cuyama Valley, because the bulletin, the Department of Water Resources Bulletin 118 has the groundwater basins across the state, and they were drawn with a very broad brush. People just looked at the topo map and said, well, there's a basin there, these are probably the boundaries. And so once you get in there and do a groundwater study, you find out where the boundaries really are. And so because we've already spent almost $2 million, we need to have, that needs to be the change. Tom Fayram and I went to the community last week, very well attended, there were probably 60 people there, and we spoke on that issue, and also Bolthouse and Grimway were there as well, and they're in the process of forming a water district right now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. Commissioner Hartman.
Dr. Russell, would you be willing to make a presentation to the Planning Commission, or is it more appropriate that we listen in on the board presentation or some other opportunity?
Commissioner Hartman, whatever the commission's pleasure is, Tom and I would be happy to do that. I've been doing it a lot, so it's easy. We've got it all ready to go.
It may not be squarely within our jurisdiction, but I think it's partly our educational role. People are always asking about these issues, so it would be helpful to me.
Yeah.
We will look into that, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Last night, there's a committee that has been set up by Das Williams' staff now that AB3 is passed. They're starting to have meetings every Tuesday night on the various subjects of AB3. Last night was planning. And so I went there, and the issue that was discussed was whether they should try to go for a municipal advisory committee, a MAC, which I learned last night from Greg Hart, who was a member of the MAC, existed in Isla Vista from 1972 to about 1983, and then it was disbanded by the Board of Supervisors, or to have an area planning commission. And so my role last night was to explain what planning commissions do, why it is that we have two, why that's kind of unusual, and the consensus in the room was that they really wanted a municipal advisory committee, and then towards the end of the meeting they said, yeah, but we want a planning commission too, which is interesting. But it was a good educational opportunity for the people in the room, I think. They really learned a lot. And then finally, one last thing. On December 10th, I'm going to be making a presentation at the Continuing Legal Education Group in San Francisco. I'm going to be a member of a panel with a consultant and somebody from ARB, and specifically what I'm going to be talking about is what can local governments do, what are we going to do to help achieve the post-2020 greenhouse gas reduction goals that have now been set by the state. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm working on that presentation right now. So
Great.
thank you very much.
Okay,
If you have any
thank you.
questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Okay. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I have a comment, actually. I watched all of the hearing for supervisors for the community plan, and one of the things that was painfully obvious, I think, is the lack of a good noticing when we're doing zone changes to property owners. I think you had more than 3 come before the board and say they didn't know about the zone change until a notice of the meeting. But what was more important to me was the fact that if they didn't get notice early in the community plan process, then they didn't participate in that. And I could see where some of the supervisors were hesitant to make a change to the plan, having the fact it's been multi-years going through the plan. And so we can't fix this today, but what I'd like staff to do with the rest of your concurrence is to put this on a future agenda so we can talk about it and talk about what things we need to do to change it, so we don't have people surprised at a late hearing.
You know, if I may, having participated in the plan for a decade, I think that while that was a concern at the hearing, I think just having attended many of the PAC meetings, that there is noticing, but it wasn't in a form where you could say, on this date, we sent notices to these property owners, and this is the information that we got these many back. It just wasn't that in that kind of package. I'm pretty sure you did the noticing. It just wasn't packaged well and presented so that the board didn't know and the public didn't know. So, and there was, I think, some, you know, this process being so long, people get notices and you toss them and you forget, and I think that's another part of the problem too. Anyway, Ms. Black.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out that at the hearing, the GPAC chair at the time said that he actually went out and knocked on doors in the affected area, so I thought that was pretty compelling. I also think that there were several people who testified, several property owners who testified or submitted letters, who said they just bought their property. And to me, it's fairly astounding that somebody could buy a piece of property and not have investigated and figured out that something was happening with the property and that a real estate agent wouldn't tell them.
Yeah.
So I think the issue was,
One of perception.
it wasn't, yes.
And Madam Chair,
Not to get into great detail, but what we don't do is we don't send them a notice that says, this is what your property is zoned today. Here's a list of things you can do with the property. Here's what we're proposing the zoning to be. Here's what the changes will be. I think that's my concern about the notice. Just to sell someone that's going from C3 to, you know, urban, whatever that thing was, I've got to go look it up. I don't really know what all those uses and restrictions are. I know where to look it up, and I know I need to, but I'm not sure that other property owners don't. So I want to change the way we do the noticing, change the information we give them, so that they're better informed about what could happen to their property.
Good.
But if I could just get a schedule on an agenda item, we can get into all the detail at that time.
Good suggestion, Commissioner Blau. Commissioner Cooney.
I have a different question for Dr. Russell. This has to do back with the short-term rental discussion that the commission is scheduled to have. Is there a plan to get input from the board at this early stage, or would this, having heard from the planning commissions, head back to staff for further work on the ordinance?
Commissioner Cooney, through the chair, the latter.
Okay. Anybody else, or any questions for Dr. Russell?
I did have a comment on that as well. I did get a comment from one person in the public that was concerned that, well, they don't see where there's a problem, and they don't see where staff, as of today, has demonstrated there's a problem that needs fixing. I'm not saying that's the way I feel. I'm just saying that's one of the comments I've got. So I'm hoping that when you bring this before us, that you identify the problem first and not just give us anecdotal things. Or I'm just warning you that that's one of the public comments.
Ms. Black.
Madam Chair, we'll fully brief the commission next week, and you actually have the staff report in your packet, which attempts to identify issues on both sides of the issue and a range of options that the commission may want to consider.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So we move now on to our standard agenda, and Mr. Villalobos, if you'd please read that item into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Anna Citron and Mark Chatillo, attorneys for Rod Rigoli, owner, Victorian Inn, to consider case appeal case number 15 APL 8, application filed on April 13th, 2015 of the director's decision to approve case number 14 LUP 528, and to determine the project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to state CEQA guidelines section 15303A.
Okay, thank you. Any further ex parte or site visit disclosures? Okay, seeing no lights and hearing from no one, we'll move to Ms. Tartacadena.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, the project before you is the appeal of a land use permit for the conversion of an interior space of approximately 1,500 square feet from wine tasting to a restaurant. At the Planning Commission's September 9th meeting, you requested that the item item be continued to September 30th, and for staff to return with either findings for denial, and also to try and work with the appellant's attorneys and applicant's attorneys to come up with some resolutions with regards to the issues raised at that hearing. On September 28th, the attorneys contacted me and requested that we continue the item to today on October 28th. At this time, both parties have come to an agreement on resolutions of the issues presented at the September 9th hearing. The proposed project changes include hours of operation for both indoor and outdoor dining, restrictions for amplified sound or music for both indoor and outdoor use, restrictions regarding special hours for New Year's Eve and the Los Alamos Old Days, noise limitations for indoor and outdoor use, and provisions for parties and special events. With regards to the noise limitations for indoor and outdoor use, a memo was submitted to you either late yesterday or first thing this morning with regards to proposed wording that both attorneys have agreed to with regards to changes on that. That would conclude staff's presentation at this time.
Good, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Blau? None? All right.
No, I'm ready.
Okay, great. So we'll hear from the appellant first, Mr. Chatillo.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Mark Chatillo on behalf of the appellant Rod Rigoli. We have gone through a fairly extensive process to try and address the land use incompatibility issues associated with this proposed land use. We found the alcoholic beverage control license midway through the process, and that specifically addressed some of the issues and helped refine exactly how the permit could and should be conditioned or described in such a way that we could address our compatibility issues. So with Mr. Allen and his client, myself and my office and my client found a proposal that we drafted together and submitted to staff. I believe your commission may have seen that from early this month. Staff took the language that we had, repackaged it slightly. We had proposed it as conditions. Instead, they moved it into the project description itself. It codified all of the substantive terms that we had agreed upon, with the one exception of the noise limitation. And we, Mr. Allen and I, came up with a refinement to staff's revisions. and submitted that to staff earlier this week and circulated it to the commission yesterday. And so we believe this is a good example of a win-win, using the mediated and negotiated process to come up with a set of conditions embodied within the project description that are appropriate and meet the needs both of the surrounding community as well as the operator and the applicant. So we would urge your commission to adopt the land use permit with the revisions that were submitted pertaining to the noise limitations, and that is with the concurrence of the applicant. I'm sure you're going to hear from Mr. Allen in just a moment. And with that, I think we will have resolved the issues that we had concerns about, and we much appreciate your support for our efforts here.
Thank you. Commissioner Hartman.
So just to reiterate, you're supportive of the noise limitations that are described in the staff memo that we received?
Yes, that is correct. That was the staff memo that was dated yesterday, and is in the public comment package is the letter that we had proposed, and I think the short answer is yes. Is that correct, Florence? That yeah, that memo includes the language that we put together. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, we submitted a memo to the Planning Commission dated October 21st, which includes a full packet of revised findings and conditions and a revised recommendation. And then I believe that the project description condition with respect to noise is further modified by the October 28th memo.
Good.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to just say that my client would like you to support the staff memo and vote it through. I would like to just suggest, that as you sit up there, and we are hoping that Los Alamos will become a vibrant community, this process has now created yet another empty storefront in the community of Los Alamos. While my client would like this approved, we've lost our tenant who can no longer sit back and wait to get what should have been a simple land use permit, and we're now at 6-8 months out, and they're still not able to operate. Or maybe we'll be able to today, but they're long gone. So there's now 4 empty restaurants in Los Alamos, 2 that are functioning, and that's not a vibrant community, and I'm not sure this is the best process for what should have been a simple land use permit to get done through. And it makes it very difficult for a business to operate under this kind of a process. Thanks.
Thank you. So any public comment? North County, I don't see any slips, and there's none here, I don't think. All right, so I'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the commission for either discussion. Commissioner Cooney?
Yes, just discussion, Madam Chair. In reading the memorandum from staff yesterday, the 28th, I have to confess, 40 years of law practice has really not helped me to read certain documents, and this was one of them. I was really trying to put myself in the place of the county trying to enforce a violation, assuming one existed. In reading it through several times, I think there is internal consistency to the point where all parties would agree at least what the regulations, the proposed limitations say. And so I felt as though, it could go forward with this language, and if the parties are content with it and staff is comfortable, they know what kind of amplified music occurs on which day and which exceptions occur. That's fine. But in the process of reading it through several times, I did come up with some typographical errors that I'd just like to run through, and Ms. Trotter-Cadena can incorporate them if the commission agrees. First of all, on page 1, the last paragraph talking about operation, the comment is made that bar service shall cease by 12 a.m. midnight. 12 a.m. is referred, 12:15 a.m. is referred to on the second page, and I think you can have either 12 a.m. or 12 midnight, but it's redundant to have both. Does everybody
I see.
know where that is?
Yeah.
Okay. On the second page of the memorandum, the very first line, the sentence is hours of operation and amplified sound or music for the station's proposed interior restaurant. There's a comma there, and I don't believe it belongs because it's not a separate clause. And then finally, in the second full paragraph on page 2, headed noise limitations, if you go down to the 5th line, which the sentence begins, low volume recorded background music played inside the restaurant and which does not to exceed, to correct that, you could just take out the word to. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then, as I say, in the 5th paragraph, special exceptions, it refers shall cease by 12:15 a.m., which I think is fine, and we've made that consistent with the reference to 12 a.m. on the prior page.
Okay. Commissioner Blau, any comments?
No comments.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So, seeing no further comments, Commissioner Hartman, turn it to you for a motion or comments. or both.
I guess I just had one, I think it's 12, not 12:15, then for Commissioner Cooney's first comment, the bar service at 12
Well, I think they need to be consistent. No, well, maybe not.
is,
I think Commissioner Cooney's first comment was to just say 12 midnight.
Okay, great. Okay.
so then I am prepared to move staff's recommendation as amended by the corrections, the 3 corrections suggested by Commissioner Cooney, as well as the amended language on noise limitations in the staff memo of October 28th.
I'll second that. So any further comments before we proceed to the vote? Okay, Mr. Villalobos, roll call, please.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And thank you for the applicant and the appellant working together. I thought this was a very satisfactory resolution. Anyway, I think, Ms. Black, that concludes our business for the day, and I think that's a record for our planning commission hearing. Did it under 45 minutes. So with that, we will see everybody next week. Good. All right, thank you, and good day.